the surroundings around you, the people around you, and the way the society around you, the community impacts child behavior a lot. How can you say we are digital natives? We are social natives. So the hug is actually a part of your entire demeanor towards your child, where you show openness, acceptance of the child, and that acceptance of the child, your acceptance of the child, is translated best by a hug.
25% of India's population is below 15 years old. What does that mean? 1/4 of our population are children and teenagers. Do they get that sort of representation in the media, in our conversation, the kind of problems they face? Do we talk about those enough? Are parents fully aware? What are the needs and the requirements and tendencies of this new generation? We have started this podcast called Nature and Nurture to address some of these issues. This is our inaugural episode, and I have with me here a very eminent name in the field of child development, pediatric development, who's done a huge volume of work over 3 decades, meets 20 to 30 children literally every day. Let's welcome Dr. Samir Dalwai, who is the founder of the New Horizons Child Development Center, runs 5 to 6 centers in Mumbai and in other parts of India as well. And he's a very respected voice in autism. Very good evening. Thanks for coming here to Free Press Journal office, and welcome.
Thank you, Ms. Afrida.
I want to begin then by just asking you, over the years, when you look back, experience of 30 years is a very long time. What is the difference you see in the nature of problems that children are facing and parents are facing today?
Well, when we began initially the center, we had the maximum number of children with hardcore neurological problems, and children who were surviving intense neonatal period. Children who were premature were being saved, children who were low birth weight were beginning to be saved, and they ended up with a lot of physical morbidity, so to speak. And we had a large number of children with motor disorders like cerebral palsy, etc. Over the next few years, we saw an increase in the number of children with learning disabilities. And the real credit for that goes to Amol Gupte and the film Tare Zameen Par, where they highlighted the issues to the entire country, and people really were aware about difficulties that children face only in learning, where they may not have any other obvious physical handicap. Thereafter, then we saw an increase in the number of children with hyperactivity or impulsivity or ADHD as it is known. And we also saw again to a large extent paralleled by cinema, where we saw children's emotional issues, whether it was a Three Idiots or academic issues or behavioral issues coming up. But
so
lately,
cinema has a lot to do with
absolutely,
the way parents are responding to their children's problems.
To a large extent, cinema is bringing these issues up, at least responsible cinema. And in the last few years, well, we've had a huge number of increase in the number of children with autism or autism-like conditions. And this is what I've been seeing in the last 3 decades of my practice.
What would you really attribute it to? Because that would be a natural question to ask. If you're saying that there are certain differences in the nature of problems, is it because earlier people were not aware, they were not forthcoming, there was a stigma? Or do you think there is indeed actually an exacerbation of these problems because of certain societal factors?
I believe there are multiple reasons, not just one reason. One, of course, is, like I mentioned, an increase in the survival rate of children who are born much preterm or at very low birth weights, and they would be left with some mild morbidity or the other. But I am a big believer in the fact that the environment and the surroundings around you, the people around you, and the way the society around you, the community, impacts child behavior a lot. I'm a big believer in that. And I do think these going away of larger families, the entire disappearance of neighborhoods, if you may, and this entire, what I prefer to call it, the jump from the cradle to the classroom, where we are finding schools and school-like activities replacing the time spent with joint families in the neighborhood, cutting your teeth on the nurturing aspects as I find them. So what I'm trying to say is I find the nurturing care that was possible in your own home or your ancestral home or in your relative's house or your neighbors, I find that missing. And school can be a great place for academics, for social engagement, but it cannot be a nurturing environment.
Cannot substitute what a home gives you or a neighbor gives you. Neighborhood
Precisely.
gives you.
Because what do you mean by the term nurturing care? Nurturing care means if I'm with my uncle or my aunt and I make a mistake or I speak out of turn or I behave badly, I will not be read the rule book to. I will be maybe gently scolded or somebody might just tell me not to do it and blah blah blah, but I'll be helped to overcome it over a period of time, over multiple iterations.
The human connect is much more, and the understanding of the child, because obviously a family member knows certain traits of the family,
Right.
so maybe more accommodating. So those things I understand is what you're
Yes.
referring to, as opposed to a classroom or a
Correct.
teacher who would obviously have some amount of disconnect with.
So there is human connect in the school as well, but there is more humane connect in this
Yeah.
house
That's an
where you
important
are
distinction.
allowing the child to evolve. Allowing the child to evolve is nurturing care. The school is made up of rule books. It's a very structured space. It has guidelines and rules and regulations. And if you step outside that, whether it is your behavior or the marks you get in examination, you will be pulled up. You will be called an outlier. That is not a nurturing environment.
So it is not, according to from what I gather, it is not prudent to expedite this process, where parents, mothers are in a hurry to put the child to a play school. From what you tell me, that if you don't build this nurturing period enough, you are actually doing a lot of more harm than good.
Absolutely, and that is the answer to your question. Why are we seeing an increase in the problems? Because I believe this entire playground, and I'm using it metaphorically, for allowing the child to evolve, to develop, to be nurtured, which was possible in a nurturing environment. I mean, the family, the neighborhood, the relative space, with lots of time has been cut short with a very quick 2 hours, 3 hours, 6 hours structured environment. And if the child hasn't developed his human engagement, his social behavioral skills, his non-verbal skills, and his verbal skills, and hits the school where you are directly judged to perform to a particular way or expected to perform in a particular way, it can actually be a negative thing for the child.
Yeah, because immediately as you enter school, the performance anxiety
Absolutely.
immediately comes in. Parents are again looking at what is the progress, what is my child learning or not. And like you said, that safe space at home, that feeling has to be entrenched into the child strongly enough before you go into the other arena.
Absolutely.
I take your point, but I want to ask you, with now the nomenclature has changed so much around the generations. Now we have the Gen Z, then the Gen X and Y and Alpha and Beta generations. When you hear these terms, since you deal with all generations in a way, the parents and the child come to you, are these terms like just fashionable terms, or are there genuinely generational differences, generational gaps owing to which these classifications are necessary?
Well, of course, it's subjective. There's no objective criteria behind it. But what do you mean by a generation apart is where your basic way of thinking, your philosophy, the way you lead your life is significantly different from another group of people. And that's how you generally look at a generational difference. What is happening now, this gap is narrowing because the change in the environment, by environment I mean society and community, is far more rapid. The changes are happening far more rapidly than they ever happened in the past, and it's being driven by technology. For example, if you read Sapiens by Yuval Noah Harari, and I'm a big fan of that book, he would say that it's been millions of years that humans have evolved. But for the largest part of those millions of years, maybe 99%, we lived as social beings in communes of 100, 120 people. We lived off the ground. We paid more attention to each other because that was necessary for our survival, or to nature, and you would see a cloud and you would know that it's going to rain and you would get back to your cave. So your life was dependent upon paying attention to each other in your social group and to nature. And hence our genes, our DNA is hardwired to be a social animal or to be socially connected or living off each other socially. In the last 100, 200 years, changes have been so rapid. I mean, the biggest change was the agricultural revolution 10,000 years back. But in the last few years, changes have been so rapid, especially with the intervention of the digital technology era, that the information and the expectation from each person is changing rapidly, and you've had to, in a way, evolve without having given your genes the time to evolve. So I often believe right now, if you look at the impact of a smartphone, which is only over the last 10 years, like he says, it's a blink of an eye in terms of the amount of time it's taken for human evolution. So our genes haven't adapted for this. My problem is we are trying to normalize this by using such terms like digital natives. Children are, I think it's a scam. How can you say we are digital natives? We are social natives. And I think this point is not being put forth forcefully enough. We are social natives. What do you mean by native? What were you originally? We were originally social creatures. We were not digital creatures. Then why this term digital natives? Oh, we see children today are more adept at media than we are. It doesn't make them digital native. You're using this term to, in a way, normalize this commercial onslaught of digital media and digital gadgets.
Yeah. In some ways, life is made easier, but in some ways, like you have heard and read many of your articles also, where you constantly make this point about how this level of bombardment of information and exposure is something that we are not equipped yet to handle. And if we continue like this, there could be consequences. Now, what are these consequences? What are you thinking?
You're absolutely right. But it's not just the bombardment of information. My bigger worry is that this bombardment of information and gadgets keeps you so preoccupied that you're losing cut or you're losing your connect with other human beings around you. You will go to a restaurant today and it's a fine dining restaurant and people are paying out of, heavily, but you will find the parents as well as the kids busy on their cell phones, hardly looking at each other over a meal. And it's the same in the house as well. And I have parents telling me that, Doc, my child just won't eat food if I don't show them the screen. So what I find is the intervention of screens has actually cut off human engagement opportunities.
There's also a reason why there are speech delays, because now you have these escape routes, and I know that a lot of parents come to you with those complaints.
People misunderstand speech as noise coming out of your mouth. Speech is not what you necessarily comes out of your mouth. Speech is knowing when to speak and when not to speak. And this a child can understand only by interacting with other people. And for that, the child first needs to develop a social connect, what we call human engagement or manushya magnata. From there, the child notices what the mother is doing all day. If the bell rings, the mother goes and doorbell rings, the mother goes and opens the door. If the doorbell doesn't ring, the mother does not open the door. The child learns what do people do, when do they do it, when do they not do it. And this is behavior.
Yeah.
And the next step after that is non-verbal communication and then verbal communication. When to speak, when not to speak. What to say in front of dad, what not to say in front of dad. This can come up only over a period of time. It cannot be imbibed by listening to somebody speak all the time. It is an interactive, iterative process of development. It's not something that can be picked up by bombardment. It in fact confuses a child, and it may lead to a child reciting long soliloquies, but not understanding that I have to give you an opportunity to respond. And what I'm seeing is so many children in school who are being referred for not being able to wait for their turn, being labeled as hyperactive children or aggressive children. Whereas the real issue is they've never developed in the way of understanding social behavior and cognitive behavior, where you have to wait for each other, pay attention to the other person, respond in a way that is mutually acceptable.
And also children imbibe from their environment. So if they see a lot of people engaged in devices, and if perhaps that is what they pick up as normal behavior, like a child today would see a lot of people engrossed in the phone. So I'm just thinking, is that another reason that because the ecosystem is such where they're born into, they see that more than people talking to each other, they are engaged with their devices. does that also create an impression in their mind that this is how humans are?
This is not only the impression in the child's mind, it's impression in the parent's mind as well. The parents themselves are seeing all other children and their own peers, other parents engrossed in the media. I think we are using a lot of misunderstanding and half-truths to whitewash this apology for why we are all hooked onto the media. And it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. At the end of the day, you need to understand whether it's good for you or it's not. I'm not against the media, but I am very clear about the fact that we have to be able to control it and not allow it to control you. I mean, let's take the debate about alcohol. People drink, but there is an age beyond which you are allowed to drink and an age beneath which you are not allowed to drink. There is an age beyond which you are allowed to drive a car. I mean, technology, car and the best cars, but you're not allowed to drive beneath a particular age.
So it's time to set that limit for children.
Exactly. And I believe underage driving is dangerous, but looking at this kind of media, I mean, look at what's coming out on the screens today, and a child who is on the screen with an internet is literally out there.
Yeah. I'll come to that issue, but before that, a slightly more concerning matter for this country is that, I mean, I cover a lot of adolescent issues as well, and whenever there are issues around, say, in a premium institute, suicides happening in young adolescent children who are not able to cope up with the pressure. What is it with this age group, like, 13 to 19, why are they so vulnerable? Why are the cases of mental wellness coming up so much in this particular age group?
The reasons for mental health issues to come up so rapidly now in this generation is simply because they haven't developed the ability to deal with issues in an earlier part of their childhood where they were supposed to bring this. It's all about building resilience. It's all about being able to tolerate the no. It's all about the ability to delay instant gratification. Where do you learn all this? You learn all this in your childhood, in your homes, with your siblings, with your cousins, with your uncles and your aunts, where you realize that you can't have your way all the time. You have to handle one aunt differently from the way you handle another aunt, and that's why it's best said in the vernacular. I believe the most important doctors or psychologists or counselors for a child are the chachi, masi, bua and mami. What do I mean by that? I mean 4 different aunts who are different people, but they are not too different from your parents. So it allows you to explore differences between people and gives you enough time and nurturing care to adapt yourself to that. It's only after that that you can adapt to the outside
But it's
people.
a luxury these days. I mean, I'm an example. We are a nuclear family. We don't have that whole, support system of extended family. There are very few who would have that privilege.
Well, you have neighbors who are saying exactly the same thing. Why don't you get together with the neighbors? So during COVID, in fact, we did a kind of a study because parents were all indoors and the children didn't have place to go anywhere. So we made a group of 6 mothers and we told them all of them were working from home. One of you take half a day off once a week. And all the other mothers send their child to your house. And one mother looks after this group of 6 kids one evening. And she gives them whatever she cooks, or the kids bring whatever they want, and she plays whatever game she wants with them. The next day, the other mother takes off, and all the kids go there. It's not just that the mother gets time.
Synchronicity, Doc, is very difficult.
What is the effort we have put in? What is the effort we put in? What is the effort we put in to buy a mobile phone?
Yeah.
So if we don't, see, the point is not about the effort. The point is how important do you find it? How important do you think it is for yourself and your child? If you think it's important enough, I don't see why
all
you
6
cannot.
mothers will have to think it's important enough, and all 6 mothers will have to have a consensus that this is the best way. Most people are private as well. They don't want to open out their lives to their 6 neighbors.
As a person who's been practicing in this field, let me tell you, let the 6 mothers do it for 2 weeks and then you see the difference. They will see obvious difference in their child's behavior because the child will learn to be more accommodative. The child will learn to be more resilient. The child will learn to adapt.
One of the reasons why people are angry, and parents like myself are angry, because we feel that, YouTube is free for all. You have cinema, you have OTT, there are certain restrictions, at least there's certain amount of, notification that given out to parents is not for children suitable beyond a certain age. But in YouTube, I mean, it's basically open for all. So therefore, a lot of people feel that this sort of content cannot be aired, and these sort of people should not be influencers and just perpetuate anything in the name of dark humor. Are you of the belief that they are pollutants in our society and they must be weeded out, or are we being too harsh on this guy?
There are two aspects to this. When you say YouTube is an open forum, you are saying that anybody can go and watch it, which means a 2-year-old child, 3-year-old child can watch it. Now, if you are enabling this platform for a 2, 3, 12, 24-year-old person, then you have to be aware about what content is being shared there.
True.
For example, if you're looking at the quality of air, why are you talking about the air quality index? Why are you so worried if it goes beyond a certain limit? When you're talking about drinking water, why are you concerned about having the best filter there? When you're talking about food, why are you talking about it being prepared hygienically and organic, etc.? Because all these things, air, water, food, nurture your body. And your body is physiologically made up to be able to tolerate only a certain kind of food, water and air.
Yeah.
Why is it that we are ignoring the fact that the mind is also made up to be nurtured in a particular way? And some things which don't suit the physiology are going to be harmful. So when you are talking about a 2-year-old child, if it's an open platform but he is able to see things which are not appropriately handled by a 2-year-old child's brain, then it is not appropriate to have that content there. So either you change the nature of the medium and don't allow access to everybody, but if you are allowing access, you have to be careful because you can be very, very harmful to somebody who cannot handle that content. And I believe the comment that you're talking about, I am not sure whether children who are 3-year-old, 4-year-old, 8-year-old, 9-year-old, 6 years old are in a situation where they can handle this kind of comment.
Exactly.
My point is, if this gentleman wants to make a comment, everybody has freedom of speech, but you also have a responsibility for what you speak.
Absolutely.
If he cannot tell you, if you are a parent and if your 6-year-old child has seen that video, and if your child is asking you questions, can this gentleman counsel you how to guide or counsel the child? If not, then you have no business to make such comments.
Absolutely, totally agree. Final question, since we've called the show Nature and Nurture, I would like to know, this has been an age-old debate, what matters more? Is it the DNA, the how we are genetically that determines everything? It's the bloodline, it is what is already there programmed in your DNA that plays out? Or does nurture play a bigger role? The environment that you grow in. In your experience, nature and nurture, where do you think the weightage lies when we bring up children?
If you see the work of developmental and behavioral scientists across the centuries, gradually the weightage has been moving more in favor of nurture. If you ask me, very clearly nurture, for the simple reason, genes cannot be modified so easily as of now. What it means is, if the genes are the hardware, the nurture around you, the people around you are actually loading the software or preparing the software. You can't change the hardware, but you certainly can edit or change the software. I am a very firm believer in the fact that we actually should be more aware about the importance of nurturing the child, because that is the area or the time or the stage of the child's life that you are setting down the brain map or the road map for the entire individual's entire life and whoever else she or he may affect throughout their life.
Before I let you go, I must have one comment. You've written about the importance of human engagement, social interaction. You're a big advocate of the hug, the jappi. So I want to know from you, how do we create that enabling environment where we don't want the engagement with devices as much? We want more human interaction and social engagement, but how do parents create that enabling environment? What would be your suggestions to parents?
The first thing is to understand and accept the fact that the only antidote or the only cure for screen time is people time. You cannot get rid of screen addiction or digital addiction unless you have people replacing the screen or the gadget. That's the first thing. The second thing is, I believe as child grows up, the parents also somewhere start feeling that there is a little bit of a physical distance between them and their child.
We don't hug our parents anymore once we
absolutely. But
age.
if you go and you meet your school friends at a reunion at whatever age, you will be very happy to meet them and hug them, right? Because a hug actually conveys your vulnerability. And this is what we must understand. It's not just what you're showing the other person that, I have affection for you. You're also opening yourself up.
Yeah.
And that is something which, as parents, we must always be aware that we are always opening ourselves up to our children. And hence, even if the child, sometimes you have a typical adolescent who may not want, certainly don't hug your adolescent boy in front of his friends. Never do that. But in your own private moments when you are at home, it's always a good way to hug somebody. But it's not only the physical hug, it's also what you speak. If you're criticizing your child, you're only bringing up his poor marks or her poor performance, and then you want to go and hug someone, it doesn't help. So the hug is actually a part of your entire demeanor towards your child, where you show openness, acceptance of the child, and that acceptance of the child, your acceptance of the child, is translated best by a hug.
Beautifully said. Thank you so much, Dr. Samir Dalwai. It was indeed an engaging, interesting conversation. As always, pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.